as a nation. Because the values come from the word value, which is what? I would say, for example, that we need to have value for human life. I think it's number one, to treat human beings with compassion, with dignity, with respect. So when you ask, how do we go about it? The curriculum is important. But then I think about how the students themselves are treated. That if they are not treated with respect, with dignity, if their environment, if the communication style does not show that they have value, it doesn't matter what we teach them. They may cram, they may pass the exams, but they won't treat people with respect. What kind of facilities do they have? What kind of toilets do we give them? We have values like honesty in our pledge, national pledge, and national anthem. And they say honesty in economics is capital. If there is honesty, there can be trust. Trust is social capital. Where there is no trust, you have somebody issues a bank draft, which is supposed to be as good as cash. And you still have to wait and let it clear into your account. And you make sure the money is there, okay, before you go ahead with the transaction. Where there is a low level of honesty, the velocity of money is very slow. It slows down the economy. So we need to inculcate excellence, for example. So I'm saying, first, there should be a vision of what we want Nigeria to be in the future.
So for you, you've identified honesty, you've identified excellence, and
value for human
life, and respect. We should go both ways. So values are great, but values without skills is a problem. And so, Mr. Durote, can you speak to the issue of skills? What kind of skills do we want this butterfly that Tom just described, that we're going to transform into? What kind of skills should this students, our graduates, Nigerian citizens have?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moderator. And I'd like to very quickly say that you give a very fine balance to the fact that this panel is almost all male, and thank God for you. We have a bit of a gender balance here. I think, first of all, when we think about the word skills, we need to understand that skills are the ability to produce a desired result. So you are skilled when you have what it takes to produce the desired results. In a sense, it comes back to the same thing that everybody has said. The desired result is not just whether you have the ability to produce a product, but is do you have what it takes to be able to produce a nation? And what kind of nation are we going to be having in what we call the future? As many times the future we always think of as a time zone that is yet to arrive. But no, sorry, the future is not a time zone that is yet to come. The future is everything we can be as a people but have not yet become. The future is everything we can do that we have not yet done. The future is everything we can have but we have not yet possessed. And so if the relevant skills that we need for the future is going to be assessed, for me, I think the first most important thing is to understand what do we want to have, what do we want to be, and what do we want to possess. And in that wise, I would say, of all the things that I think it's in Africa, not just Nigeria, leadership skills. Leadership skills. Leadership skills are, by definition, the ability to create and deliver desired change, which is what we need as a people. And so whether that change is in the area of education, is in the area of transportation, it's in the area of healthcare, it's leadership skills. Now, of all the leadership skills that you need, I think intuitive skills are the most important, which means how do I, in any situation, faced with a myriad of opportunities and choices, how do I make the best choices to deliver the desired result? And this is where we come back almost to the same thing that everybody's been talking about, values. But we need to put these into tools. And it's one of the things that I'm very glad that His Excellency, the Vice President, mentioned, that we need to be not just talkers. We need to be, they say a verb is a word that describes an action, but is not an action in itself. And if we're not careful, we can become verbers. Verbers are people who talk about doing stuff, but don't really do it. And so I think that we need to get beyond the verbing and begin to think of practical tools. And one of such tools is one of the things that I shared with us at the we have a values card here that contains 10 values that is able to be given to children all across the country. Again, practical tools. Values will give you intuitive skills, and intuitive skills, I think, are critical for leadership skills, which is the ability to create the future.
All right, thank you very much. We've been asked to please speak louder, so that the audience can hear us better. Mr. Morty, competitiveness, global competitiveness. How do we get there? How do we build that into a future-ready curriculum?
Thank you. I can't help diving into this, and you probably read out of my time. But two quick things. First of all, I have issues with the value thing. It's very important, but in the end, value is not what you translate to work. And you can argue if our educational system today is not as good as it was decades ago, who were the leaders that led us to this point? And what values were they? And what values were inculcated in them then? We could argue that those were better schools and almost definitely a better educational system, but it's failed us so far. Now, to answer your question, I think the world has changed around us, obviously, and something that's happened with the whole, what they call globalization, with ICT and with trade liberalization, is that we are no longer alone as we used to be. We're not in isolation, and people are beginning to compete. When you have good jobs in Nigeria today with the banks or in the petroleum sector or in ICT, you have people outside Nigeria take those jobs. So it's changed. Now, what can be done and how do we go about this? I would say if you look at countries that have been very successful in transforming their economies in the last few decades, and there are several of these in Southeast Asia, you can look at Korea, Singapore, and some places like that, they've not quite invented this radically different system of education, and this is where I might have some disagreements. But what they've done is focus fundamentally on two areas. One is the totality of the education system is part of the strategy of the country. So if the country decides we have this where we're going, in those cases was an industrial policy or conscious decision that we want to be competitive in this form, then the education system was congruent with that and produced people for the kind of jobs that are relevant in the future and at that in those places. Now we need to make a conscious decision of where do you want this country to be in the next 10, 20 years? How do you want to go there? How do you want to compete? Then our education system will be designed around that to make that happen. And I'll split this in 3 levels just to get more solution-oriented. So at the primary level, obviously, where we talk about the basic education level, clearly there are ways we can engage the private sector and have mechanisms where we could get not just funding, but also get the right incentives for teaching. I disagree. I mean, if you watch Wedding to Superman or any of those things, you would see a system even in the US where they successfully got teachers to improve the quality of education and shun corrupt practices. I mean, there'll be a business to have a system, but it's not enough to throw it away. Clearly right now, the money being spent, we're not getting enough bang for the buck for education, and you can see islands of excellence in the country. How are they doing that successfully? Lagos Business School, it's a private sector funded, private sector driven institution, it's global standard. And there are secondary schools here and other schools at other levels, and even skill acquisition in the banks and some corporates that are global standard. And what they have there is that there are clear mechanisms where there are market-driven incentives to make these things happen. I don't know how long I can speak for this, but okay, good.
If you don't mind, I'd like to take one of your points and go on to Professor Godswill Obioma and tell us if we're going to craft this vision for the future, we've got to know where we are.